Here is the homie Tamashi, and today I want to introduce you guys to an old friend of mine.
Who's that Pokemon?
What the fuck kind of Pokemon is that?
If you guessed right, you guessed Haomaru. You know, that guy with the spiky hair that hurts like shit in CVS 2. Or that guy in the big red arcades with the dope-ass music. Cue the music. So for those of you who have no clue as to who this character is, allow me to introduce the main character, Haomaru. He's from the Samurai Shodown franchise, or Samurai Spirits in Japan. So this game is Japanese as all hell. I'll try my best to explain all the super old Japanese stuff that is constantly referenced throughout the game. So let's begin with the basic info on Haomaru. Haomaru was born in the 13th year of Horeki, at the Hour of the Bull. Now you're all probably wondering,
What the hell is that, you weeaboo?
first of all, I'm not a weeaboo anymore. And second off, Horeki is the name of an era from Japan. Japanese eras usually last about 5 to 20 or so years on average, and new ones are created based on a plethora of different occurrences. This will be somewhat important later. As a side note, we are currently in the Heisei era, and the current emperor is the Emperor Akihito, who is expected to abdicate the throne on April 30th of this year. History lesson postponed. So Haomaru's birth date in American is September 5th, 1763 at 2 a.m. He's 5 Shaku 7 Sun. Shaku Sun and Kanmei are old Japanese units of measurements before they started using the metric system. These measurements roughly equate to about 5 feet 7 inches, and he weighs 17 Kanmei. 1 Kanmei is roughly 8.3 pounds. So Haomaru weighs 141 pounds.
So why is this important?
Sorry, I was really thorough when I did this research.
I can see that. The fuck, man?
At any rate, Haomaru's blood type is A. In Japan, blood types are like zodiac signs. A blood types are described as neat people that value peace with others and get stressed out easily. Haomaru's weapon is Fugudoku, which translates to the blowfish blade. He uses his own personal fighting style. He doesn't like cowards or cockroaches, which he calls grease bugs, and has a short temper like his blood type suggests. Haomaru's idol is his martial arts instructor Niko-chin. His ideal type of girl would be a Yamato Nadeshiko, which is basically like a traditional and tactful housewife. He enjoys duels, relaxes by drinking good sake, often enjoys performing on the street with his sword and takes it very seriously, and his mantra for his path as a swordsman is, "The path on which you must gamble your life and walk to the end." Okay, now that we have finished reading Haomaru's Tinder, let's get into the story part. Quick disclaimer, the majority of this information is based on the official SNK website and scenes from the game itself. A small percentage of the information comes from the wiki due to a lack of resources. Please inform me on any mistakes so I can correct them accordingly. So basically, I just blame the wiki. Now, settle up, kids. It's time for a story.
Listen properly. In the beginning. Yeah. In the beginning.
So Haomaru grew up with a knack for swordsmanship, and he became a force to be reckoned with at the age of 15. While challenging anyone with a sword, he happened to challenge the famed Yagyu Jubei to a duel, and Haomaru suffered his first loss. Jubei was impressed by the young Haomaru's skill, but Haomaru was not. Because of his loss, Haomaru threw aside his pride and sought out a famed priest for instruction. The priest's name was Niko-chin Kafuin. At any rate, Haomaru was taken in by the priest where he learned to strengthen his swordsmanship alongside Kibagami Genjiro, another boy in Kafuin's charge. The two quickly became close friends and rivals while growing up rapidly as able swordsmen. At some point, Kafuin had the boys duel each other for the prized Fugudoku blade that the priest had in his possession. Haomaru was defeated. However, Genjiro fought his close friend viciously and in his bloodlust almost killed Haomaru. Just as Genjiro was going to strike down his friend, Niko-chin interrupts and deflects his attack. The priest then expels his red-headed student and gives the sword to Haomaru. This started the never-ending feud between the two students. With Fugudoku in hand, Haomaru decided to pave his way as a swordsman, testing his mettle during a time of plagues, famine, and war. Let's pause this story here. This is where the history of Japan ties into the game. Let's start from when Haomaru was born to where he is at this point. As I said before, Haomaru was born into the last years of the Horeki era, but he started to grow up as a child in the Meiwa era. The people of the Meiwa era were able to see Lexell's comet lighting up the sky, which would have been cool, except the Meiwa era was known as a really shitty era to live in. This is mostly due to many floods and disasters like drought, a typhoon that devastated the Imperial Palace, a tempest, another storm that blew down more than 4,000 homes, and the Great Meiwa Fire, which spanned 15 miles, destroyed more than 10,516 structures, and claimed more than an estimated 6,000 casualties. Apparently, insane fires are pretty common in Edo, and are referred to comically as autumn leaves.
That shit ain't funny, motherfucker!
At any rate, in order to try to change their luck, they decided to change the name of the era to the Anye era, meaning eternal tranquility, which did absolutely nothing. First, an epidemic of diseases spread all across the country, killing 190,000 people in Edo alone. Kyoto had a massive flood. Sakurajima, the volcanic island, erupted a mile away from Kagoshima, killing 16,000 people, and more heavy rains and floods happened in Kanto. Now moving on to the lovely Tenmei era, which kicked things off with a famine that got worse during the third year. A couple of people got assassinated, including a child of an official, and the Tenmei famine would eventually last for a total of 6 years. But before that, we land at 1786. Let's pause the history lesson here and get into Samurai Spirit Zero, which was titled Samurai Shodown 5 in North America. So we land at the summer season of 1786. Haomaru is 22 going on 23 this year, and a huge rebellion breaks out in the game's Japan, led by a man named Kyogoku Hinowa no Kami Gao. We'll just call him Gao for short. So Gao decided he would start a rebellion against a character named Tokugawa Yoshitora. In real life, the Tokugawas ruled Japan during the Edo period as the shogunate, and the emperor was just there for traditional purposes. Back to the game. Haomaru entered the fray, fighting a whole bunch of adversaries along the way, and eventually at the end of the war met with Yoshitora, who promised Haomaru a duel once everything was over. They wager that if Haomaru loses, he must join Yoshitora as one of his retainers. It would seem that Haomaru definitely wins, otherwise he'd probably be traveling alongside Jubei or something like that for the rest of the story. Anyway, we enter the following year, and this is the year that the new Samurai Shodown is hypothesized to take place. But we'll just have to see until that game is released. Before I forget, it is speculated that sometime between Samsho 5 and Samsho 1, that Haomaru meets Shizu, and they become lovers for some time. However, Haomaru, who is keen on not straying from his path as a samurai, leaves Shizu behind to follow his dreams. It's also important to note that Haomaru affectionately refers to Shizu as Oshizu. Now let's get back to the last two major events of the Tenmei era in Japanese history. Starting with the 11th shogun dying and moving on to the last year of the famine, when a great fire in Kyoto lasted for 2 days and destroyed the imperial palace. So we make it to 1788, the last year of the famine and the beginning of the first entry of the Samurai Shodown series, where a man named Amakusa is resurrected and responsible for all the chaos that has been occurring. Meanwhile, Haomaru goes from place to place fighting the strongest warriors and catches wind of a powerful and wicked sorcerer. Haomaru lights up with excitement at a chance to fight a powerful enemy and makes his way towards Amakusa. When he finally arrives, the two begin to fight, and Haomaru manages to cut down Amakusa, ending the terrible onslaught of disasters. Shortly afterwards, Shizu, or Oshizu as Haomaru calls her, begs Haomaru to stay by her side. However, Haomaru professes that he is a warrior first, turns her away, and goes on to his next fight. His fight with one of Shiranui Mai's ancestors. I'm just joking. Or at least I think I am. Now, before we get to the next title in the timeline, we find Haomaru traveling for a duel. He comes to a town and passes by a boy named Hisame Shizumaru, an orphan boy who is constantly being bullied. Haomaru defeats a warrior nearby, impressing Shizumaru. Shizumaru asks Haomaru to help sharpen his swordsmanship. Haomaru agrees and Shizumaru becomes his apprentice. We now make it to Samsho 3. There is a powerful samurai in Japan named Minazuki Zankuro. Zankuro is known as the demon due to mercilessly killing the residents of entire villages. Shiori is the surviving victim of Zankuro's final massacre. She wants to avenge her people and inquires the help of the famous Ronin Haomaru. Haomaru and Shizumaru arrive where Zankuro decided to live as a hermit, and Shizumaru challenges Zankuro to a duel and wins. The wounded Zankuro stands up swiftly and professes that the fight is not yet complete. At that very moment, Zankuro is suddenly struck by lightning and killed. Afterwards, the pair then take Zankuro's body to Nikochin's temple to bury it. Finally, we make it to 1789 and the events of Samurai Shodown 4. A giant castle appears from the demon realm, known as the Makai. Furthermore, all the disasters in the first game start occurring again, and Amakusa is revealed to be revived. This time, he seems different somehow. He has split himself into two beings, one evil and one good. The evil one seals the latter and begins to wreak havoc upon the land. Haomaru, as always, revels in the chance to take out a strong opponent. On his way, he bumps into Genjiro, who threatens to kill Haomaru if he gets in his way. Haomaru ignores his former senpai and makes his way to kill Amakusa. As he reaches the threshold, he is interrupted by Genjiro, who is furious that Haomaru did not back off. Not only that, but Genjiro hasn't forgotten how Haomaru claimed Fugudoku. The two exchange words and blades immediately after. Meanwhile, the evil Amakusa was slain, and the castle begins to crumble. The fierce battle between Haomaru and Genjiro is abruptly put on hold and the castle collapses, with the pair narrowly escaping. Afterwards, the two are split between a humongous crater filled with debris, and the battle is left undecided. Not too long after the events of Samsho 4, we find Haomaru resting while a figure moves in from the shadows. The assailant moves in to strike, and Haomaru gets up promptly, running his would-be assassin through. As he falls to the ground, the assailant curses Haomaru and whispers, "Ambrosia lives." Ambrosia is the ruler of the Makai, whom Amakusa has been trying to resurrect into the human world all this time. It would seem that Amakusa succeeded this time. Haomaru is completely oblivious to this, but at least he senses foul play in the form of a demon and decides to visit an old priest he knows for answers. Haomaru eventually arrives at Kokain Temple. And finds his old sensei well. He explains what is going on and repeats the name Ambrosia to his former master. Nikochin tells Haomaru that he has become immensely strong, but he is still no match for what is to come, and instructs Haomaru to stay at the temple. Completely ignoring his sensei, Haomaru pours up some drinks in order to celebrate their reunion. They become belligerently drunk and Haomaru stays at the temple. But at dawn, ignoring the priest's many warnings, and tempted by the allure of battle, Haomaru sneaks out and sets on a new adventure, to find and slay Ambrosia. Through Haomaru's travels, he becomes aware of the priestess Mizuki, whom is possessed by Ambrosia. Mizuki intends to empower herself by absorbing the souls of all the warriors around her in one fell swoop. Haomaru and many other warriors in pursuit of Ambrosia are somehow saved. Afterwards, an Ainu tribeswoman from Hokkaido by the name of Nakoruru joins Haomaru into the Makai where Mizuki lies in wait. No, seriously, wait. That song is so good. Anyway, they survive the trip to the Makai and pursue Mizuki, who is an immortal possessed by the spirit Ambrosia, the very god of the Makai. Upon reaching Mizuki, Nakoruru sides with Haomaru, and they make a joint effort to defeat the possessed priestess. After Mizuki's defeat, Haomaru and Nakoruru barely escape the Makai with their lives. A few moments later, Haomaru wakes up wounded and is confronted by a hot-tempered Genjiro who was searching for him the entire time. Genjiro, blinded by rage and a lust for blood, readies his blades and tells Haomaru to do the same. A severely injured Haomaru grabs at his sword in a futile attempt to defend himself. Just then, out of nowhere, Shizu appears before Genjiro and proceeds to shield Haomaru with her body, while pleading with the revenge-driven swordsman to fight Haomaru when he has recovered from his wounds. Genjiro, somewhat miraculously, comes to his senses and sheaths his sword, swearing that he will duel with Haomaru when he recovers. This part of the story ends with Haomaru holding Shizu tightly in his arms. At the end of the year, we make it to the events of Samsho 64. We set it off with a sorcerer from the Makai called Yuga the Destroyer, who sets a plan he made 20 years ago in motion, where he planted a bunch of sleeper agent kids that grew up to be powerful warriors. Thus, Yuga's army of hermaphrodites surface.
What the
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't know how this happened, but that's some very strange criteria for building an army. Anyway, Haomaru, as always, makes his way to the source of the problem for a chance at a challenge. Meanwhile, Yuga had his strongest warrior Shiki seek out Haomaru as part of a plan for Yuga to resurrect himself. Shiki eventually fails to procure Haomaru, and he makes his way to Yuga's personal bodyguards, Deku and Dekuina. Nakoruru joins Haomaru once again, and together, they subdue Yuga's bodyguards. Before the two semi-humans are defeated, Yuga the Destroyer absorbs the semi-humans onto himself and is resurrected into the human realm. Haomaru clutches his sword and charges in to take on Yuga. Yuga suffers a defeat at the hands of Haomaru. As a result of Yuga's death, Shiki loses her memories as his subordinate. When Haomaru readies his blade to cut her down, Nakoruru persuades Haomaru to spare Shiki, as she is no longer a threat. He complies, and Shiki lives out her days as Kaede. For the next game, we reach 1790, a whole year later. Yuga is resurrected and amasses another army for a sinister purpose. Haomaru sets out again in search of a challenge, and after a few run-ins with Yuga's army, Haomaru makes his way to Yuga's base of operations. Meanwhile, due to the resurrection of Yuga, Shiki's memories return, but she is no longer interested in serving Yuga. However, a man named Asura from Yuga's army finds Shiki and corrupts her with his aura. Thus, Shiki becomes one of Yuga's subordinates through force. The pair now make their way to Haomaru, and together they subject him to the same dark aura, which overwhelms and corrupts his senses as well, transforming him into a sword demon. The three of them defend the entrance to Yuga's lair, and they are met with another Asura. The two battle, and Edgelord Asura manages to defeat the one serving Yuga. The two Asuras merge, becoming one being. This complete version of Asura cuts down Yuga the Destroyer. As a result, Shiki and Haomaru are released from their spell. Afterwards, Haomaru finds out that Shiki gives birth to a baby, whom she leaves in the care of Haomaru and Nikochin before disappearing. It's at this point in the story that we hit a massive time skip. We finally make it to the last canon installment in the series, Samsho Warrior's Rage, which happens 20 years later. At this point, Haomaru is much older, and his sensei has passed away, leaving Mikoto, Shiki's child, primarily in Haomaru's care. At some point, Mikoto runs off to the island of Ritenkyo and joins a gang for the man she loves. Aww. Ritenkyo is an island inhabited by criminals in an attempt to reform them. A worried Haomaru sets out to find Mikoto. He eventually finds out about Oboro, the leader of the gang, as Shiki joins. In Haomaru's story, he makes it to Oboro and cuts him down. He then finds Mikoto nearby. After being reunited with the girl he helped raise, he gets ready to leave with her, but she wishes to wait for the man she is completely enamored with, whom is currently off fighting somewhere else. Haomaru refuses to leave Mikoto to wait alone, and waits by her side, respecting her decision. As he waits, he tells Mikoto about her parents. Afterwards, he reflects upon his own life, and goes off in an old man tangent comparing Mikoto's love interest to Genjiro, thus ending Haomaru's story in the series. Although there are many characters that cross paths with Haomaru in a large way, they don't directly affect telling Haomaru's story. Plus, I can go into those details when I tell their story. Finally, Samurai Shodown Sen is considered non-canon, but I will still touch on it briefly. So Haomaru once picked up a pupil named Takechio, who grew up to be a fine samurai. After some time, the two bumped into each other and Haomaru recognizes the growth within his former student. As such, Haomaru wishes to duel with him. Unfortunately, his former pupil has to focus on his current rescue mission. Understanding this, Haomaru lets his student tend to his duties while trying to satiate his hunger for combat elsewhere. At the end of the game, Haomaru's ending has him bump into his student after he completes his mission. Haomaru finally gets the chance to fight Takechio in a duel, and he revels in the excitement as they cross swords.
That story wasn't too bad. It just needed more boobs.
Well then, now that we have the mainline story out of the way, we can get into a couple of interesting facts about Haomaru. It would seem Haomaru doesn't always finish off his opponents if they run or he deems them already defeated. Aside from Haomaru's shadow form, there is also a demon from the Makai by the name of Rasetsumaru, who looks like Haomaru with purple skin. I might cover him in another video upon request. Haomaru's character design was based off of a legendary samurai by the name of Musashi. Musashi is famous for not only surviving every one of his battles, but also developing a famous dual-wielding style. He was also a bit of a vagabond and eventually becomes a hermit, which is probably what further influenced Haomaru's design. In the first game, Haomaru's rival was Ukyo, who has a skill named Tsubame Geishi. This is the name of a skill used by one of Miyamoto Musashi's many rivals. But in the second game, Ukyo's place as Haomaru's rival was given to Genjiro and stayed that way afterwards.
Why would they design him after Mushi Sushi?
Musashi is a legendary samurai that... You know what? Just read the book. It's called A Book of Five Rings. It's a good book. Anyway, Haomaru's visual design is heavily based off of the appearance of Hyakimaru from the manga Dororo. All of Haomaru's attacks are pretty strong, and his specials usually have something to do with cyclones or just hitting like a truck. Even though Haomaru is the protagonist of Samurai Spirits, he's a ronin without a master, and not actually a samurai. This pretty much covers everything I was able to dig up on Haomaru. If any of you are interested in seeing other Samsho characters covered, leave who you want to see in the comments and I will do my best to get to them. I got a lot of the Samsho images from the wiki and Fighters Generation. If any of these were from a specific artist, please let me know so I can send some traffic their way. I absolutely loved a lot of these images. I also want to give a shout out to the Samsho Discord. Please join the Discord and come play some Samsho. Let me give another shout out to the homie Wagon for the amazing lines he voiced.
Yo, he cuts up like 5 dudes at once.
I told you it was a good book. I also want to give a shout out to Saltamiya. She has some cool Haomaru gear. Link in the description below. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I wish you all the best of luck in your daily grind.